Hey everybody, Tom Judd here, Chair of IFMB CED, but also happy to be part of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance Founders Council here today with Dr. Dan Clark. And Dan, we're excited to have you here and for you to be a part of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance. Hey, you had something pretty special happen in recent months related to your work in the National Health Service of UK with COVID. What happened?
Yeah, Tom, thanks very much, and it's a huge pleasure to be here with you today, Tom. Yeah, well, we all know that there's been a significant pandemic across the whole of health globally, and the UK we're not in any way exempt from that. So the COVID pandemic came to our shores like it did to everybody else and caused a huge amount of difficulty for the National Health Service. I'm a clinical engineer. I work in the National Health Service. I happen to be head of department of one of the largest departments in the NHS. And so when the pandemic struck, like every other hospital internationally, we had a lot of work to do to prepare our hospital so that we could look after the patients as we had a surge in a number of patients. But the NHS as a whole and the UK as a whole struggled. We didn't have, like many other countries, we didn't have enough ventilators for the expected patient numbers that we were going to see at the start of the pandemic. We didn't have enough the whole range of equipment that we would want to see in our intensive care department. For my own hospital, for example, we tried to increase our intensive care facilities about 4 or 5-fold, and we were repeating that across the whole of the NHS. So there was a huge shortage, particularly of ventilators. So the UK government went out and bought anything that looked like a ventilator, essentially, from the world markets, and they weren't alone in trying to do that. All over the world, people were trying to buy up all the ventilators that were available. And some of the ventilators that were bought, and hundreds were bought, thousands indeed, were brought into the UK. Some of those ventilators were not of the standard, not of the normal way that we would expect to see ventilators in the NHS. And so that caused a problem for clinical engineers and hospital departments up and down the country, trying to commission these new ventilators from strange sources, which we weren't used to. So I set up a team on behalf of the UK government to assess all the ventilators and infusion devices that came into the UK during that time. As I said, there were many hundreds, thousands of them. They were brought in by the RAF, and then they were delivered to me and my team, and we evaluated them to see how we could employ them in the NHS. It was an exciting time, very hectic, working with many organisations, UK government, the UK military, the RAF, the Cabinet Office, the Department of Health, and various other experts up and down the country. And we managed to commission and get ready for commission these, we ended up calling them the exotics, but they were just devices that the NHS were not used to, really. And we put in place a system so that we could commission them rapidly. And yeah, partly because of that, I was recognised by the UK government and by the Queen in the Queen's New Year's Honours List this year, and was rather embarrassed to be awarded an OBE by the Queen for the services that me and my team provided, and it really was the team that provided it in getting these ventilators ready for the NHS during that first very scary wave of the pandemic.
Incredible story, Dan. So tell folks a little bit more about yourself and what led up to all this for you and things you've achieved in the CE field leading up to this last year.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Yeah. So as I say, I'm head of service currently for one of the largest clinical engineering teams in the UK. I think my team at the moment has about 105 people working in it, and I guess being such a large team, we probably cover most of the elements that people would recognise as clinical engineering. So if I gave you a thumbnail sketch as how I got here, essentially, started way back. My first degree was actually not in engineering. My first degree was in physics, but it was experimental physics. So I was always involved in building things and in solving problems. And so after I graduated with that physics degree, I was lucky enough to get a job in the NHS, in the National Health Service in the UK, and I went through the UK training programme for medical physics and clinical engineers. At that time, the discipline that I worked in, we referred to as clinical instrumentation. And I guess I spent about half of my time looking after existing medical equipment used in our hospitals. And the other half of my time I spent designing and developing new equipment to bring into the hospital. This led to me getting a PhD in tissue optics and spectroscopy. And then after that, I spent quite a few years working in supporting optical instruments, optical techniques in medicine, and particularly medical lasers, as they were just really becoming mainstream in the NHS back then. We're talking the late 1980s, I guess, 1990s. Then for a little while, I actually spent a bit of time outside of healthcare. I left healthcare for a couple of years and I worked in a number of fields, one of which actually was in technical training for the rock and roll industry. But I guess we perhaps better talk about that at some other time. And then I came back into healthcare after a couple of years out, first as a manager, managing a scientific service, and then I got a post as a consultant clinical engineer, and then I finally got my current role as head of service in Nottingham, right in the middle of the UK, in about the year 2000. And I guess because of my research scientist background, I've always tried to make time not just to support the operational services of the clinical engineering team, but also to look at research and development, and particularly adoption of new technologies into the healthcare. I was awarded a personal chair in clinical engineering from the University of Nottingham in about 2010. And then I went on to establish the Centre for Healthcare Equipment and Technology Adoption, otherwise known as CHEETA, in approximately 2014, I think it was. And this is a service specially set up to support new inventions, new innovators, developing new technology, getting that technology ready to be used in the healthcare setting, and particularly, obviously for me, in the NHS setting. About 20, yeah, going to say, and then in about 2016, we developed a joint venture between the hospitals in Nottingham and the universities in Nottingham to speed up the curiosity-led research into medical devices and really concentrate on developing new technologies that we could adopt into healthcare. And for that work, we were awarded, the team I led at the time was awarded quite a prestigious national prize from the chief healthcare scientist in the UK, Dame Professor Sue Hill. It was known as the Partnership Award, the National Partnership Award, because it recognised the work that we did, bringing together universities, hospitals, and industry to support the development and adoption of new technologies.
Well, Dan, I didn't want to interrupt you because each time I was, at each sort of point I wanted to say wow, but then there was a second wow, then there was a third wow. So what would you say? I mean, you got this history of innovation, seeing, both managing the way things are, but envisioning and starting to move us toward the future. What would you say clinical engineering is, and what are its main goals in healthcare?
Can I perhaps start with its main goals and work back from that? Because I think, I have this sort of personal mantra, which I think is, my main goal professional goal in life. And that mantra is to maximize the potential of medical technology for the benefit of patients and their carers, whilst minimizing the risks. And how we do that, how we actually achieve that, that is what clinical engineering does. And the way in which clinical engineering does that, that maximizing the potential while minimizing the risks of technologies in healthcare, is obviously going to vary depending on circumstances. In a very large, well-equipped hospital like mine, it's going to be quite different from a smaller, perhaps less well-equipped hospital, for example, in Benin or some other African country. So it's going to be different what you actually do, but we're all about trying to achieve the same goal, the same thing, which is improving health outcomes, improving patient experience through the use of technology.
You've summarized some of my next question and maybe that the work around COVID, but what would you say are some of the main activities of CE professionals, particularly from your country perspective?
Yeah,
main
okay,
activities.
thanks, Tom. Main activities. Well, the discipline that we refer to as clinical engineering is actually very diverse. So people who are working in this field might find themselves undertaking, one or more of a very wide range of activities. Maybe the most obvious and certainly the most common, I guess, is the discipline that we refer to as equipment management, or perhaps people refer to it as health technology management, or HTM. And this in itself is quite a wide set of tasks. But we might summarize them by saying we're about making sure we have the right equipment in the right place at the right time and in the right condition. So this is going to include activities such as, working with our clinical colleagues in deciding what equipment your healthcare organization actually needs, and then working with other professionals to make sure that we can buy that right equipment in the right amounts. And then once the equipment gets to us, gets to site, gets to your healthcare organization, it's about checking to make sure it's the right equipment and it's in the right condition, that it's working safely and it's working correctly. It's about recording that information on that equipment on an information management system of some sort, so that we know what equipment we've got in our hospitals, in our healthcare establishments, and we know what we've done to it, and we know where we've deployed it, and we know what the servicing needs are, and how to replace it at the end of its useful life. It's about deploying that equipment into the right clinical areas and supporting those clinical areas in being able to use that equipment correctly. It's about making sure the commissioning and installation requirements are correct. And then throughout the equipment's life, it's about making sure it continues to work safely and effectively with appropriate technical maintenance. And should it go wrong, it's about effecting repairs on that equipment to get it back into service and keep it working in a safe and effective way. And I guess ultimately then it's also about recognizing when that equipment can't continue to be used in service, and organising for it to be replaced with an alternative. And the amount of support that we can provide at each one of those stages of the equipment life cycle is obviously going to be dependent on the resources, the number of staff, and the amount of workshop space we've got available. We're dependent on our resources, of course. Here in Nottingham, my own teams, as I said, we're a fairly large team, so we put quite a lot of effort into that pre-acquisition stage, before the equipment even decided what we want. I have a specialist medical equipment planning team, and they work with the clinicians to survey the market and find out what's the best equipment to bring in to meet our clinical needs, to make sure that equipment is legal, it's regulatory compliant, it fits the needs of our hospitals, and that we know that we can then look after it throughout its life. Things like making sure that we know we can put in place a technical regime to look after it, and a clinical regime to make sure that the clinical teams know how to use it. We need to know that we can clean it and reprocess it and get it onto our management, patient management information systems, and all that sort of jazz. So we do quite a lot of work before we even get the equipment. Again, we have another team in Nottingham which specifically looks after the safety management of medical equipment. So if an equipment does occasionally go wrong, so when it goes wrong, this team would investigate why it went wrong, and if there's lessons that we can learn either in terms of technically managing it or clinically managing that equipment to prevent it going wrong and other equipment like it going on in the future.
Great stuff.
As I've already mentioned, as I've already mentioned, Tom, we also do a lot of innovation in Nottingham. So we have a small team that actually designs new technology within our hospitals, but we have a wider team which supports our clinicians in bringing in new technology. And sometimes that's brand new technology that's never been used in hospitals before. Sometimes it's existing technology that's being used in a different way to support clinical research. So we do a lot of support work in looking after our clinical team's research activities as well.
All that said, Dan, so why'd you join GCEA? Why'd you join the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, and how do you think it'll help?
Gosh, why did I join GCEA? Well, I hope some of what I've said already has persuaded you, if you weren't already, that I am passionate about the benefits that technology can bring to us, to healthcare, how technology can improve patient outcomes, how technology can lead to better experiences for our patients, how it can keep people healthy longer, and it can help people with mobility and a range of other needs for people. So I'm passionate about that. But for technology to be able to realize those benefits, somebody at clinical engineering has to be there to make sure that all happens. Clinical engineers, all over the world need support, support to raise their profile, support to gain recognition for the recognition they deserve for the work that they do. They need support to get resources to do their job and to develop their skills and their careers. They need support with peer groups. They need support with training and credentialing. I've had a wonderful career working in clinical engineering, and consider myself hugely fortunate that throughout my career I've worked with fantastic teams who taught me so much and supported me at every stage of my career, enabling to reach whatever success I've reached. It's been through the support and help of others. But I recognise that globally, perhaps not everybody is so lucky to get that sort of support throughout their careers, to get that sort of support in their environment. And I'm determined, if I can, to play my part as best as I'm able to provide and help provide support for others working in this field all over the world. So I'm absolutely thrilled, delighted to be part of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, an organisation whose principal aim is to support, develop and promote clinical engineering internationally. The stated aim, one of the stated aims of Global Clinical Engineering Alliance is to be one voice internationally to represent the interests of clinical engineering and health technology management professionals by promoting education, by promoting training, best practice, practical research, collaborations, professional competency, and innovation, and all of that with the express goal of improving patient outcomes, patient experience, and community wellness. So Tom, I've been, as I said, I've been fortunate throughout my career, and I'm privileged now to be part of this new organisation, and excited about the potential that we now have to bring about these health improvements for millions, billions perhaps, of people right across the globe by supporting clinical engineers and clinical engineering to continue to improve access to healthcare and health improvement through technology.
Thanks so much, Dan, and just know how proud we are of you and what you've personally brought and your team has brought, and how you've brought honor to our field. And so we're very thankful today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's very kind.